April 14, 1912. It's late and bitterly cold in the North Atlantic. The world's newest and safest ship, the Titanic. As the dinner was being served, two well-dressed men are seated at a single table. They include a prominent British journalist. He tells a tale that is at once captivating and disturbing to his audience. Everything started in ancient Egypt about the year 1000 BC. At that time, a single woman was born in Thebes. No one knew who she was or what she did for a living, but she was a powerful figure in society anyway. By the end of her life, she had risen through the ranks of the College of Amen-Ra to become a priestess. Her body was embalmed, and then she was buried in a big wooden casket with an ornate lid picturing a woman next to an illegible script. She was one of many nobles whose bodies were stolen and buried by bandits. The mummy of this woman has been underground for over 2,900 years. The location of the grave was kept hidden. The old tomb was stumbled upon by a group of villagers in the early 19th century. The priestess peace was broken by their arrival. That day, the mummy was stolen from its tomb, and nobody knows where it is now. A number of years and decades later, four wealthy English friends decided to visit Egypt and take a trip down the Nile. On their way to Luxor, they detoured to a temple where they found the mummy's empty casket. There was a shot of the priestess staring blankly off into the distance. There was a dangerous threat in her eyes. They didn't recognize the owner of the case, but were so impressed by the treasure's splendor and power that they purchased it from the people nevertheless. The night the case was scheduled to be delivered to the buyer's hotel, the buyer failed to show up. They said they saw him leave the hotel and disappear into the desert. Nobody could make sense of his behavior. They all failed to recognize him. The second member of the group then removed the casket. On the way back to the house, one of the friends was seriously injured. The new owner of the case arrived in London to find that the bank holding his money had unexpectedly bankrupt. A former businessman, he is now forced to beg for money. A third close friend succumbed to the evil influence of the old five. His life, health, and career were all destroyed in the accident. The owner became bankrupt not long after returning to London, where he gave the ancient casket to his sister. The Egyptian artifact and its threatening vibe were immediately apparent to one of the woman's companions as she entered the room. Finally, the owner's sister handed the case over to a famous photographer. He took pictures and was astounded by what he found. He claims that a human-faced priestess is depicted in the photos. She gave him a cold, threatening look. No one other than the photographer has ever touched the film in the camera. They made no changes to the original photo. Soon after, the photographer disappeared without a trace. The story becomes muddled at that point. The object's owner's sister purportedly gave it to the British Museum. The case's courier and his assistant were both killed in a car crash not long after. Another version of events has a wealthy businessman making the purchase from the Egyptian tomb. His house burned down, and 3 of his family members were injured in following mishaps. He gave the British Museum the cursed mummy case. The journalist claims he looked into the mummy's history and the people who owned it for months. He put together the pieces of evidence that supported each accident. It appears that the mummy case can relax in the museum. The priestess was surrounded by numerous queens and monarchs from different time periods. But peace did not prevail. Researchers and professors of ancient languages toiled to decipher the symbols used in the case. Those who attempted to disturb the priestess' peace were the targets of many of the inscriptions, which were translated as curses and ill fortune. Night after night, the museum's guards and staff heard a knocking sound coming from the mummy case. There was knocking and cursing and crying. The other exhibits in the hall were also relocated nightly. It wasn't long before everyone realized that the priestess's ghost was responsible for the ongoing spellcasting. One individual with a private collection found the case intriguing. He bought it from the museum not to add it to his collection, but rather to scare the mummy's spirit away. It's unclear how hard he tried, but he obviously failed. Eventually, he was able to sell the mummy's casket to a wealthy American archaeologist, who took the mummified body and relocated it to New York. The other man at the table, who is clearly flummoxed and terrified at this point, turns to the journalist and asks, "Now what? What happened to the mummy?" "She's here," the reporter chimed in. "When someone has their own eyes to witness something, they can't possibly deny its veracity," he said. After meal, everyone heads back to their cabins. The journalist settles down to sleep, but his mind keeps going back to the mummies. He attempts to convince himself that all the information he has gathered about the priestess must be false. No such thing as a curse exists. As soon as he closes his eyes for the night, he is awakened by a soft nudge. A crew member eventually knocks on his door after he waits for a while. He announces that the ship has experienced an emergency and that everyone must immediately head to the upper deck. The reporter takes a deep breath of fresh air and looks out at the large crowd. However, you need not fret, but it seems the engine has been damaged, according to reports. Others argue that the sole motivation is security. The reporter has an instantaneous grasp of the situation. The great ship is starting to sink. What happened was due to the priestess' actions. The Titanic went down to the ocean in under an hour. One tale has it that the priestess had some influence over the ship's captain. No one wanted to take a chance and lose something of such great value down the pit. So, they had the artifact's container placed in close proximity to the command center. The captain, in his horror, peeled up the lid of the casket and beheld what lay within. After that, he began behaving in an unusual way. It has been said that the spirit confused his mind. As they reached a region known to be rife with icebergs, he disregarded the crew's request that they slow down. Perhaps the priestess is still resting in her sarcophagus, which was buried in the Atlantic Ocean. However, I want to be totally honest with you. It turns out that the whole thing was made up. Not a single scrap of evidence suggests the Titanic was transporting a tomb or mummy. The rumor began circulating sometime after the disaster. Many theories were put forth at the time as to what had caused the Titanic to sink. The shipwreck was caused by secret organizations. Titanic under ETS attack. The Titanic was sunk on purpose for financial gain through insurance claims. These far-fetched theories were huge hits with the audience. One of these theories was proposed by a well-known journalist who reported about a cursed mummy on the Titanic. The custom eventually reached the general public and became well known. At least one of the reasons why some people believe in these things is hidden in the complexities of human psyche. Every urban legend tells a story about something that is either secret or taboo. This overestimation of one's own importance is a primary cause of conspiracy beliefs. However, it would be a mistake to ignore the fascinating nature of these various theories. The mummy described in this story is an actual artifact that may be viewed in the British Museum. Only the wooden lid depicting a female figure remains on the sarcophagus. Its previous owner remains unknown. Who the previous owner was is also unknown. Prior to its arrival to the museum at the tail end of the 19th century, very little is known about the artifact. There, they referred to her as the unfortunate mother. The staff at the museum assures us that it won't bring us any misfortune. What do you think? Was Titanic cursed by the mummy? Or was it just the most tragic accident?